Maintain alert under War Plan Bravo.
Tonight on Unidentified.
The hair on the back of my neck stood up.
It shot straight up and was gone.
The team investigates the link between UFO sightings and nuclear installations.
These vehicles were hovering directly above nuclear weapons facilities and nuclear missile silos.
They were there scoping out our capabilities.
These weapon systems had been shut offline. That's a terrifying capability.
There is a definitive link to nuclear technology. The question is, why?
These things don't seem to obey the laws of physics. They're sure as hell not going to obey the laws of politics.
Everything we know about UFOs is changing. Thanks to a team led by former Pentagon UFO investigator, Lou Elizondo.
That is real, whatever that is.
And former top intelligence official, Chris Mellon.
This is a current, continuing phenomenon. It's happening, it continues to happen.
They discovered 5 unique characteristics that UFOs have in common. They call the 5 observables. And released groundbreaking videos that forced the Navy to admit its pilots were coming face-to-face with unidentified objects.
The U.S. Navy made a shocking admission today.
Strange flying objects caught on tape by their own fighter pilots are in fact UFOs.
Something needs to be done.
Now a new wave of military witnesses is coming out of the shadows.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared.
I've never seen anything move like that. Shape, size, speed, it's clearly unidentified.
The team is united on a new mission. Connect the dots to reveal the truth about UFOs.
This thing had no capability, like anything on Earth.
And warn the world about the dangers they might represent.
Carl Sagan once famously said, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof." He was absolutely right. But now we have the proof.
When I was at the Pentagon, one of the concerns we had was the connection that UFOs have to our nuclear weapon systems or nuclear power plants.
Lou Elizondo is on his way to interview a former U.S. Air Force officer willing to speak about his UFO sighting for the first time. The alleged sighting took place at an Air Force base with nuclear weapons and a long history of strange encounters.
My name is Daniel Gibson. I'm a retired Air Force major.
Major Gibson, thank you very much for taking your time to come and speak with us here today. I'd like to start by asking you, what inspired you to come here today and why now?
In the fall of 1995, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, right outside of Great Falls. Malmstrom is primarily a ICBM missile base.
Since the 1960s, Malmstrom Air Force Base has housed hundreds of intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads capable of destroying entire cities. During the Cold War, the base was a key part of America's nuclear arsenal that provided a protective arc across the nation's northern tier.
Launch trajectories from the Soviet Union come over the poles across Alaska and Canada. A ring of bases were established across the northern United States to house both ICBMs and strategic bombers. And they were the bedrock of our strategic deterrence and our security and safety.
Maintain alert under War Plan Bravo.
In the fall of 1995, Gibson was on board a KC-135 as it conducted mid-air refueling for a fleet of B-1B strategic heavy bombers, which can carry nuclear payloads anywhere in the world.
Once the refueling was done, we started our trip back to Malmstrom. I moved forward to the flight deck to enjoy the aurora borealis above us.
Flight paths for these refueling missions often included views of the aurora borealis, or northern lights.
All of a sudden, there was just this very bright light. The aircraft commander and the co-pilot, they saw it first. Time kind of froze for us, but it was probably a good minute that it was there. This light We watched it all the way down into the aurora where it stopped. And you could actually see the aurora flowing around it, just as if you would see a bow wave going around the front of a boat. The longer the object stayed in the aurora, the brighter the object got. And then it just shot straight up and was gone.
So some people would say, you're obviously confused, you saw a planet or a star.
We had no doubt in our mind that it was not a star or a planet because it entered our atmosphere. It was in the aurora borealis itself, and then it shot straight back up. I've seen the International Space Station. It moves at a very fast clip. This was moving 10 times plus. We all had the same reaction. It was almost a stunned silence. None of us had seen anything like that before.
Some folks will say, well, you know, it could be a Russian first stage booster rocket coming in on re-entry.
Well, initially we thought it was a shooting star, but then we saw the speed at which it was descending, and then it stopped.
According to Gibson's account, the object possessed 3 of the 5 observables: instantaneous acceleration, the ability to accelerate instantly from a standstill; hypersonic velocity, speeds of 3,700 miles per hour or more; and transmedium travel, the ability to move through air, water, and the vacuum of space.
You're going from an atmospheric environment to potentially a vacuum environment.
I don't know of any object in our inventory that has the capability to stop mid-re-entry, stay in position, and then once it's done, accelerate back out of the atmosphere. The G-forces would kill a human being.
To Elizondo, Major Gibson's sighting is part of a pattern. While working with ATIP, the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Elizondo says investigators researched multiple UFO sightings around northern tier nuclear bases during the Cold War. These sightings were part of a recently leaked 500-page government-funded report detailing dozens of alleged Cold War UFO encounters. Investigative journalist Tim McMillan has studied the report.
There's a chart that showed the number of UFO sightings within proximity to different nuclear facilities that house weapon systems. There's a distinct correlation that these objects appear to be encroaching upon airspace of the northern tier. If you look at just those numbers alone, it's alarming.
One of the most remarkable Cold War-era sightings also occurred near Malmstrom Air Force Base, 28 years before Gibson's experience. In 1967, several Air Force personnel reported seeing a glowing red object flying over the base. The object appeared to move rapidly and was able to make sharp 90-degree turns, stop abruptly, and reverse course, much like the movements described by Major Gibson nearly 30 years later.
Both the UFOs had this incredible ability to take off and basically go from a very low velocity, almost a complete hover, to an incredible speed in the instant of time.
And there is one more detail that concerns Elizondo and his team. Reportedly, moments after the sighting, 10 of Malmstrom's nuclear warheads were suddenly, inexplicably turned off.
These weapon systems had been shut offline, so they couldn't be fired. If these were Russian aircraft, if these were someone else's aircraft, the idea that something could possess a technology that could fly within proximity and take these systems offline, that's a terrifying capability.
Is this some sort of U.S. secret technology or perhaps some sort of adversarial secret, weapon system or platform? There is a definitive link to nuclear technology, whether on the battle space or in time of peace. That, I think, is becoming more and more clear. The question is, why? What is the connection?
It's not just happening near nuclear bases. Alarming UFO activity is also being reported around U.S. nuclear assets at sea. Last year, the team interviewed multiple U.S. Navy personnel,
Brother Dave, how are you?
Brother Lou, how you doing, man?
including 2 fighter pilots, who described encountering tic-tac-shaped UFOs during a 2004 training exercise after taking off from a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier.
And all of a sudden it goes, whoop, and it kind of turns. He just rapidly accelerates beyond anything that I've ever seen, crosses my nose, and it's gone.
They uncovered other encounters with nuclear-powered carriers.
It was basically a sphere with a cube inside.
It's rotating. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I don't know if I would have believed it either.
If these objects are interested in U.S. nuclear technology, Elizondo and Mellon want to know why.
These weapons and programs are the ultimate guarantor of our security. Any potential adversary would seek to neutralize that capability. These unidentified craft, they're demonstrating capabilities far in excess of those we possess. So we have every reason to find out who's operating these vehicles, how they work, and why they're here.
Now, Elizondo is on his way to investigate another development.
Hey, Mr. Marceau.
Lou,
Good
how
to
you
see
doing?
ya.
Another military eyewitness is reporting a UFO near a location with a possible nuclear connection. A UFO he says was giant.
Now that I'm no longer confined to just collecting DoD information as I was in ATIP, I can start talking to other people, see if there's anything we're missing. Then ultimately, use that information to help inform some of our key decision makers in our country. Every one of these stories adds another data point. There's always something a little bit different that we didn't know before.
Lou Elizondo is investigating the connection between UFOs and U.S. nuclear assets.
If there's a technology out there that has the ability to interfere with our nuclear response capabilities, that is a national security issue for our country.
He's meeting with an eyewitness who had a terrifying encounter on a major North American military base.
Hey, Mr. Marceau.
Lou,
Good
how
to
you
see
doing?
ya. Thanks for inviting me to your wonderful abode. What I'd like to do, David, I want to hear this story from front to back.
It was my first annual training. August 1st, 1992, I was deployed to a Canadian Army base called Gagetown in the province of New Brunswick.
CFB Gagetown is a large Canadian Army base just north of the U.S. border, used by both countries as a training hub.
It was all Army. I don't know how many units were there, but people from all over the Northeast U.S. and Eastern Canada all met up there to play these war games.
Marceau and another guardsman he refers to as Mike because he doesn't want his real name revealed, are assigned night watch at a remote ammunition storage bunker known as a pad.
Mike was at pad 1, I was at pad 3,
And what's in between each pad?
thick forest. It was a very bright night. The moon was full. I could see the whole big pile of ammunition in front of me. I had a weapon, had no ammunition. I was a sitting duck there. About 11:20, the hair on the back of my neck starts to stand up. I feel like someone's watching me. The tree frogs and the crickets and all the nighttime forest noises stopped. And then I look up at this enormous spacecraft. My first instinct is, don't move. I was afraid that whoever was in there was gonna see me. I knew as soon as I saw it what I was looking at. And I was scared, petrified. I don't think it was moving when I first noticed it. And then I saw it move over the trees. It's not like anything that's naturally occurring or even man-made. I could hear like a static noise, like a TV that's not tuned into any channel. We had field phones, always live. I picked up the phone. I said, Mike, you there? He goes, yeah. I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Thank God you said that." I thought I was going crazy.
So if you can, David, real quick, just describe for me front to back, rough dimensions.
Marceau later asked an illustrator he knew to create an image of the craft.
Oblong, rounded corners, slightly tapered towards the tail. It was taller than my house, more than an acre long, half that width. It was huge.
Did you notice any wings, control surfaces, navigation lights, landing gear?
No visible means of keeping this thing aloft and stationary. There was no downwash.
Only recently has Marceau been able to talk openly about what he experienced.
I was traumatized by this, just saying, yeah, I saw an alien spaceship.
These were your words. I knew it was an alien ship. Now that's a word I typically don't use, but you did.
I knew what to look for, and it was neither an Allied nor Soviet bloc aircraft. It was not a commercial aircraft. It was that. It's pretty clear to me that they were there scoping out our capabilities. And here's these huge caches of ammunition. Hey, let's go check this out.
Really, really appreciate it.
Elizondo wants to know more about Marcel's fellow witness. Until now, Mike has stayed silent, but he agrees to speak to Elizondo by phone.
Hello? It was fairly routine shift, and I spotted a very bright yellow-orange light across the road. It was about 30 feet above the treetops. It was there for at least a half hour or more, and all of a sudden, without any warning, it just took off. It was like a streak of light. It went so fast that if I'd closed my eyes for a second, I would have missed it.
Did it shoot over the horizon? Where did it go? Did it go up?
All I saw was a streak of light. It was completely silent. I was talking to Dave. I don't know if he asked me or if I asked him, but I remember, did you see that?
Elizondo recognizes 3 of the 5 observables: instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity, and anti-gravity, the ability to move without conventional propulsion or heat signature.
These vehicles don't seem to have any obvious signs of propulsion, no wings or control surfaces, and yet somehow they seem to be defying Earth's gravitational pull. Both Mr. Marceau and Major Gibson described objects with this incredible ability to take off from a very low velocity, almost a complete hover, to an incredible speed in the instant of time.
But why would a UFO show an interest in a Canadian military base? Gagetown was not far from Loring Air Force Base in Maine, another of America's northern tier bases.
Whatever this phenomenon is, it seems to be keenly interested in our defense capabilities. The Canadians are very closely integrated in defending North America. So not the least bit surprising that sightings would occur on both sides of the border.
I found it very interesting. He said they were guarding ammunition, and he mentioned that there was a 50-gallon drum barrel to simulate an atomic burst. Wow, why would we have that? Doesn't mean it's a real nuclear device, but it's to simulate that. Is there a connection, once again, between potential nuclear technologies and UAP activity?
But another theory suggests a different kind of nuclear connection.
You know, it's interesting. About 60 miles outside of Gagetown, there is a nuclear power plant.
The Point Lepreau Nuclear Power Generating Station is one of just 4 nuclear power plants in all of Canada. Previously, Elizondo had found a link not just with UFOs and missile bases, but also power plants.
You know, when I was at ATIP, we were under the presumption that there was definitely a connection between UAP activity and our nuclear energy. The question is who's doing it and why are they doing it?
There's all sorts of reasons why an enemy would want to spy on our nuclear capabilities. They want to know, do they have advancement in nuclear engineering that, frankly, they don't understand or have yet? So it's no surprise that somebody is interested in our nuclear capabilities. At this point, is we just don't know who the hell it is.
A potential adversary is going to want to destroy our nuclear weapons capability to survive a nuclear conflict. They're going to want to understand any vulnerabilities that they may have.
out of the tree line rises this huge UFO.
Lou Elizondo is reviewing David Marceau's eyewitness account with former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Chris Mellon.
He remembers the entire forest being completely dead silent.
Everything ceased?
Everything ceased. He did report it through his chain of command. His chain of command ridiculed him for it.
Were there follow-up interviews? Did OSI or Army counterintelligence or anyone interview him?
Negative.
There should have been follow-up. This kind of reporting should be examined in a purely objective fashion.
Some of our facilities owned by Department of Energy, DOE, may have some reporting as well that hasn't yet been brought to the light of day, so to speak.
And we know that's the case from the early years of the nuclear program. There were so many sightings that it generated memos that got to the 4-star level.
These memos and official reports have never been made public. Now, to further explore the link between UFOs and nuclear capabilities, Elizondo is seeking out new witnesses. This Air Force security specialist has asked to remain anonymous because he fears the repercussions of coming forward.
I was stationed at F.E. Warren Air Force Base from 1987 till 1991.
During the Cold War, Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming was one of America's most secure nuclear strongholds, with over 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles on constant alert.
Roger, Boeing Wilson out. Clear.
Like Malmstrom, Warren was part of the Northern Tier nuclear defense.
I was a security specialist, worked out in the missile fields. I was an armed response team member at that point, which is 2 men working a 12-hour shift, and I usually got stuck with working nighttime.
It was June 1988, the waning days of the Cold War.
We had just gotten on duty, and we had the missile crew down in their capsule call up to the flight security sergeant. Told him that they had several missiles go offline. It's very rare for a missile field to go down. And the whole time that I was there, it had never happened except for that one incident. My ART team leader and I, we got into the truck and we headed off, just patrolling the whole area. It was right around 9:30ish at that time. We had just got done clearing the site. That's when the lights went out. It's pitch black. We can't see anything around us. Then we see this pinpoint of light moving from north to south. And then all of a sudden it made that immediate turn. And we were thinking like, wait a second, we don't know of any aircraft that would make that kind of 90-degree turn.
He then says he witnessed something even more alarming.
This light came up very quickly, stopped over us and hovered over us. No sound. We were both poking our heads out the windows looking up at an object probably about 100 feet above us that was 50 to 60 feet in diameter. The edge of it was bright, but at the bottom of it, you could tell it was a metallic surface that we could see red and blue lights moving in a circular fashion. It was saucer on the bottom, saucer on the top, and then what I think was the control area was angular and then flat on the top of that. When the lights were enveloping us and the whole missile silo, we felt a tingling sensation over our skin, over our faces. It was so scary, you pretty much just frozen with fear. It was only there for like 2-3 minutes, but when the actual craft left, it just zipped. I mean, it was a streak of light going off.
The witness and his partner returned to the launch facility.
We're still scared at that point, very tense. And the flight security sergeant was like, okay, so anything go on out there? We were like, nope, nothing happened. After that, we would never talk about it. We knew, just hearing from other people on the base, they label you as somebody who has mental problems.
The airmen stayed silent. But just months later, multiple witnesses report a similar unidentified aircraft in the skies above Warren Air Force Base and nearby Cheyenne, Wyoming.
I got something spotted up here in the sky. I can't figure out what it is.
This is a picture of the unidentified flying object that hovered over Cheyenne early Wednesday morning. According to 911 records, the officer saw a circular object floating in the sky, and he said it was moving slowly across the horizon.
It was kind of long-shaped and kind of oblong, and it kind of curved in it, and you could see lights in the middle going around like this, changing colors from red, blue, green, and even some yellow in it.
Whatever it was, it returned last night when there were several new reports of UFO sightings over Cheyenne.
There were never any official reports about the incident at Warren Air Force Base. But the sightings over Cheyenne serve as proof for one witness.
I've never told any of my family or friends exactly what happened. Even after 30 years, the emotions are still there, they're raw.
It's safe to say now, as a result of our current investigation here, that we may be looking at a 60-year effort by someone to either conduct reconnaissance on or interfere with our nuclear capabilities all along the northern tier. The concern is there anything we can do about it? And the answer may very well be that there's nothing we can do about it right now.
3 military eyewitnesses appear to back up Elizondo's belief there's a connection between UFOs and American and Allied military bases, some that housed our most powerful nuclear assets. But could an alleged encounter half a world away raise even more questions?
I'm looking for validation for 24 years of this memory living in my head.
Today, another veteran is coming forward with a sighting that Lou Elizondo believes could raise alarming new possibilities about a UFO's ability to track nuclear assets.
How are you, sir?
Good.
Thank you very much for coming here.
I've never said anything about this in a public venue. You don't necessarily want to be the guy who saw a UFO. You don't want to have that stigma.
Jeremy McGowan served in the U.S. Air Force Security Forces.
I was part of a team that would get deployed all over the planet for multiple different types of exercises or operations.
In the mid-1990s, McGowan was deployed on a classified security mission deep in the Jordanian desert.
We're basically told, here's a crate, a very large crate that you could have driven a Volkswagen Bug through. There was no markings, no stencils, no nomenclature, no plaques, no cordons. It was just a large wooden crate that had absolutely no business being in the middle of the desert. And we're told, don't let anybody near it, don't get near it.
Any idea what might have been in that crate?
I was never officially briefed as to what the contents of the crate was. We were told that this crate was a top priority for security.
McGowan wonders why a crate in this remote desert needs such intense security.
On the base, we had Naval Special Warfare, 75th Ranger Battalion, FBI, the CIA. You had units from the military that have very specific tasks when it comes to nuclear security.
McGowan suspects the crate contains some kind of nuclear material. A realization that becomes even more concerning one night during his deployment when he's scanning the sky with night vision goggles.
All of a sudden, I saw a pinpoint of light in the night vision goggles that shot from my 6 o'clock, goes straight up to the apex of my vision, and then does a 90-degree turn and shoots off to my 9 o'clock. And it happened multiple times. I'm seeing something that is going from my visual horizon to another visual horizon with a 90-degree turn in the middle at the apex, and this was happening in under 2 seconds. And it was repeating.
To Elizondo, the observables displayed by the object do not obey the laws of physics.
If you're looking at a fighter jet or a helicopter, as it's turning, it's going to have an arc. It's going to have a radius to that turn.
Why would the things you witnessed not be a satellite?
Satellites go in orbits in very circular paths and directions. This was not that.
McGowan says he believes the object may have been tracking what's in the crate.
It was my belief that this was probably targeting the crate. It was able to look down and select certain radiation signatures. The government still has not told us what was in the crate. They probably never will. But after speaking with the people that I've spoken to, I have personally no doubt that this was a recovered warhead from one of the fractured states of the former Soviet Empire. That was our biggest concern.
As the wall came down, the Russians, they didn't seem to be able to fully account for their inventory. They had the largest nuclear inventory in the world. There was a tremendous amount of angst and concern in our government.
Could a UFO be capable of tracking a single nuclear warhead to the middle of a remote desert?
I have to be a little careful how I discuss this aspect, just like he does, but there is some reason to believe that inside that crate was what we refer to as a broken arrow, potentially a nuclear device.
Whatever it was, Jeremy McGowan is convinced that what he saw in the night sky was no normal aircraft.
When you look at an aircraft with night vision goggles, you can see the wing strobes, you can see the front strobes, you can see everything. This was not identifiable. This had no strobing effect. It had no flash patterns. It had nothing except a point of light that moved extremely quickly from horizon to horizon. If there are things that can move like this, they do pose a national security threat. I would take it a step further. Is this a global threat? Is this something that affects everybody regardless of borders? These things don't seem to obey the laws of physics. They're sure as hell not going to obey the laws of politics.
The team has now heard 3 accounts of UFOs with advanced capabilities, allegedly near sensitive nuclear assets, and a 4th on a major base not far from a nuclear power plant. They believe it's information members of the US government need to be aware of, especially Lou Elizondo's mentor, the man behind the Pentagon's secret UFO program. Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon have been gathering new evidence of UFOs, allegedly seen near America's nuclear assets. Now, they are in Washington, D.C. to sound the alarm.
They can't avert their eyes to these anomalies any longer. So we can stimulate that interest on the Hill by bringing some of the latest information to them, as well as to the executive branch.
The team has briefed top lawmakers before, and now some of those lawmakers are paying attention.
I'm not going to get into any of the contents of the briefing, but the military and others are taking this issue seriously, which I think in previous generations may not have been the case.
What shifted, and why are politicians now coming out and saying we've received the briefing? Well, I think a large part of that does come down to Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon. You have 2 people from very different walks of life, both of whom have dedicated their careers to public service and national security. They've really opened this issue up at senior government levels. They're the pathfinders here. If you see Lou Elizondo as the Kirk, then you should see Chris Mellon as Spock.
Elizondo and Mellon have started the conversation, but have yet to convince the US government to view UFOs and their connection to nuclear assets as a national security threat.
I did have one very brief meeting saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly.
We're seeing something in our skies that we don't know what it is, and yet, for some reason, our national reaction has always been very dismissive. Nothing to see here, folks. Don't pay attention to that. If this turns out to be an adversarial technology, and we've since been leapfrogged now for decades, I think there's going to be some people that are going to be held accountable. The American people are going to demand it.
Elizondo meets with the man who helped start it all, the lawmaker behind the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, to strategize how to get congressional attention.
This, for me, is probably one of the most important interviews that I've had, frankly, to date. If it wasn't for Senator Harry Reid, there never would have been an ATIP. There never would have been the truth.
The former Nevada senator has been battling cancer, and Elizondo is eager to sit down again with his friend and mentor.
It's good that we're looking at it, and I hope we do look at it more, and I wish government would get more involved rather than less involved.
Elizondo briefed Senator Reid on the new eyewitness accounts he believes suggest a stronger connection between UFOs and nuclear assets.
So whether these are UAPs buzzing in and around our missile silos or around our nuclear triad capabilities, there does seem to be now empirical data showing conclusively that there is some sort of interest. Now the question is this interest a benign interest, or is this some sort of surveillance or reconnaissance effort?
I think that it's something that the military and State Department should be interested in.
He's been aware that these activities are continuing and had the courage to take it on and to say, you know, I'm not going to let personal embarrassment come between me and national security.
Like Elizondo, Reid believes the possible link between UFOs and nuclear assets makes understanding what they are even more critical.
Why do you suppose there are people in our government that are afraid of just talking about it?
They're afraid because they don't want to sound like a fringe person. I've had people come to me, you can't do that because it's not in keeping with my religion. I don't accept that.
What's your advice to the American people?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Put members of Congress on the spot. There have not been 10 people who have seen these things, not 20, but thousands and thousands are documented. Shut down. We have ships, see things out in the water. Communications stop. So this isn't anything we can just pretend doesn't exist. UFOs exist.
I know you don't like to speculate, but have you had any theories, personal theories, what these things could be?
I've always believed there's other beings out there. We're not talking about devils and goblins, we're talking about science. I have absolute confidence that the thousands of people who have reported them is too forceful to ignore. We're missing the boat if we don't do everything we can to find out what they are.
Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough.
Lou Elizondo has spoken with 4 military witnesses.
Hey, Mr. Marceau.
Who say they saw unidentified objects while on duty near sensitive sites in the 1980s and 90s.
It was neither an Allied nor Soviet bloc aircraft. It was not a commercial aircraft. Pretty clear to me that they were there scoping out our capabilities.
All of a sudden, there was just this very bright light, and then it just shot straight up and was gone.
This light came up very quickly, stopped probably about 100 feet above us. No sound. It's very rare for a missile site or a missile field to go down whatsoever.
This was not identifiable. It had nothing except a bright point of light that moved extremely quickly from horizon to horizon.
I don't want to conform the facts to already a preconceived opinion that I might have. So I'm curious your thoughts.
So we know this is occurring. We know it from these witnesses, and this was a recurring phenomenon beginning at least in the 70s, if not prior. Whether what's being seen lately is connected in any way to what was observed then is an open question. There hasn't been a satisfactory answer provided yet. But why we would ignore this data rather than seize it and examine it is a mystery to me. It makes no sense.
For Elizondo and former top Pentagon official Chris Mellon, these recently uncovered sightings provide ominous new data points that extend the scope and time frame of what's known about UFO activities near America's nuclear assets and call for further investigation.
Time and time again, when I'm talking to individuals who were stationed at strategic locations around the world, UAPs are being seen over some sort of U.S. nuclear capability.
There should have been follow-up with regard to these reports. Unfortunately, in some cases, as we could see from these witnesses, what they got was ridicule rather than interest. That's extremely unfortunate.
This is what is so compelling to me as someone who does national security journalism. When you have some of the most highly trained observers over a prolonged period of time in the most highly cleared important positions in the US military, whether that be manning an ICBM base in the middle of nowhere, or in a nuclear submarine, or in a jet fighter. These are witness accounts and evidence points that we also cannot ignore.
Though the team has recorded compelling new testimony connecting UFOs to U.S. military nuclear assets, one mystery remains. Who controls these unidentified craft, and for what purpose?
Why would UFOs be interested in our nuclear weapons or our nuclear energy systems? We know human beings would be. We certainly are very interested in foreign governments' nuclear proliferation. And so, are they aliens or are they us?
I still remain to be convinced that it is not from here, but at the same time, there's a very good possibility that we may not be alone.
It seems to me that we need to look at anything and everything. The fact that vehicles are operating in such close proximity to these strategic nuclear weapons suggests that someone may be seeking to identify and exploit vulnerabilities associated with those weapons in order to defeat it. It's difficult to imagine a more pressing requirement from my standpoint than to find out who is operating these vehicles, why they're here, what their intentions are. The stakes are so high, they're existential.